Welcome everyone to Pro Tools Carbon here today for North America. I'm Jeff Komar from Avid and super excited for you to stop by and hang out with us for a bit. Um, as always, we've got more than we can possibly show in the next 45 minutes, but I'm gonna give it a shot. We're super excited to have, and you probably saw a little bit about Carbon and the launch that we did last week. Kind of my goal here is to really have you walk away with a lot more information about the workflow, really what the box is about, and kind of uniquely and just really what's special about the box. And so that's I'm super excited to be able to show it to you and present it. And I will encourage you to ask questions. We're connected to a couple different social media streams. So if there's something during the prezo, please ask a question, and one of our other additional application product specialists will basically respond to your text. Thanks again for stopping by. I've got a Carbon here, and I'm going to be showing it on my 2016 MacBook Pro. So we're going to get into some workflow and kind of talk about that. But let's kick it off and talk a bit about Carbon. Okay. So Carbon is a new entity. It is a new thing from Avid. It is not just an audio interface. It is a whole new system. We call it a hybrid audio production system. And I think hopefully by the time that you're kind of done with this whole conversation, you'll have a really good idea of what that's about. It is truly unique, I believe, and really inspired, really compelling. I've kind of digested what I want to tell you about the box, what's unique, into three kind of categories. And that's really the sonics of the box, the fidelity, the speed, and the workflow. So obviously the sound quality matters. And as you're cutting, as you're recording, as you're mixing, you want things to sound as close to the source as possible. And as we, when we hear things that sound great, we get inspired. Speed, I kind of look at that in kind of a dual way, if you will. Speed of the actual conversion and the path through the DSP processing. That's kind of the first part of it. And then the second part of it is really anybody that's creative, anybody that is an artist, anybody that's a musician, you've got sounds, you've got music in your head, and you want to get it out as fast as possible. And there's always impediments to getting that on the page, getting that on the timeline. And so the faster that you can get that out, right, get it out of your head, I think that is huge, right? Preserve that kernel, that creative idea, and get it out. And this system allows you to do that. And that's partly because of this whole workflow that we're going to look at, which is really unique and really, really cool. So fidelity, speed, workflow, and the workflow's king because it allows you to work faster and get those creative ideas out and really be inspired to create amazing things. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper as we get into this on some of the specs and stuff. I don't want to go super deep too fast. I really want to kind of present the product, but we're really proud of this totally Avid designed box with incredible 32-bit conversion. It's actually a 32-bit pure path all the way from conversion through AVB and into Pro Tools, so the whole way. So it's pretty unique. We're going to talk about variable Z, which is really neat, basically being able to adjust impedance for microphone and instrument sources, and not only to do impedance matching, but using it creative as a guitar player, or plugging into my electromechanical keyboard. Lots of different applications. So we're going to talk more about sonics absolutely as we dig in, but speed, back to the speed, right? My kids use the word savage all the time, which is kind of disturbing, but so having a really, really, really low latency pass so that when you're there, when you're monitoring, when you're listening, in my case, I'm recording drums, but if it's a friend, it's guitar or it's a keyboard, having this incredibly low latency path. And that is the whole thing from the converter, getting from analog into digital, going through DSP processing, something like, for example, like a channel strip, and then going out the DA to headphones or to speakers, near fields. You can make that whole path in less than a millisecond. And you have to experience that, right? Because that is the closest you're going to get to, in my case, it's sitting in the back of a drum set and hitting a snare, and the immediacy of the snare, you're part of the drum kit, right? Same thing with a guitar player standing on stage in front of an amp and playing. There is something to the immediacy of hearing that audio, and it's inspiring. And you're going to play better 100% if you can really remove most of that latency and be able to craft your tone and sculpt at the input, right? It really promotes inspiration, I believe. So this is a pretty unique thing, having tremendously low latency. I encourage you to try this. So you're going to hear me talk for the next 45 minutes, but I encourage you to go and play with Carbon, because it's really, I think your mind will kind of explode at how low latency it is. So that's that. Really, as I said, the whole big thing about this system is the hybrid engine. And that, if I get nothing else across to you in the next 45 minutes, it's really about the hybrid engine, it's workflow. And this is not just for Carbon, it's kind of the whole Pro Tools environment universe going forward. This is a big deal. So what is this all about? Well, again, it's about capturing an acoustic source with the best fidelity and in the lowest, in the best immediacy possible, right? With that whole DSP path. So using DSP, using the right tool for the right job, right? It's not just like, let's throw a ton of DSP at everything. Everything's in DSP all the time. It is really about using the right tool for the right job. So if I'm cutting, I want that sub 1 millisecond, right? I want to feel it as close as possible, whether it's drums or keys or guitars or whatever, right? That's the point. And I can engage that, and I'm going to show you that. And then when I'm done, hey, I don't know about you, but I got a really powerful Mac, and it can do a lot off the host. So I'm just going to say, you know what, I'm done cutting that. Let's mix. That's going to now live off of the native engine. And that's the beauty of the hybrid, is literally, having the right tool and basically allocating between native and DSP. So the really huge thing to understand is that every DSP plugin has a native equivalent. So when I cut and I'm really happy with my tone coming in, and I'm like, that's great, perfect take, pop out of DSP mode, it will sound identical when it's on native. And the benefit there is, obviously, I can do a ton off of the host. I can send that session to my friend Robert. He can work on a laptop only, with Carbon, without Carbon, with HDX, no issues of compatibility. I could render it, I can print it, I can do real time, any of that. So that's kind of what we're talking about. And you've got tremendous amounts of cycles to do things like virtual instruments off of this machine. Okay. So let's actually flip over to Pro Tools. This is really important. And before we do anything yet, I want to open up the playback engine. I want to make this crystal clear that Pro Tools Carbon is an engine, right? This is not, certainly it has a similar kind of footprint and vibe to something like a Matrix Studio. And we've got a lot of IO that we've made over the years, HD Omni, right? Lots of different possibilities. But this is a very unique box because it is an engine, just like HDX and HD Native is an engine. Pro Tools Carbon is an engine. It has IO, it has preamps, it has a whole monitor section, which we'll talk about. So it is a system, right? And it's connected via AVB, and we're going to look at that in some depth. But I just wanted to really call that out. It is not simply an IO, which is hooked up via DigiLink or some other protocol. So we're going to look at the monitor section in more detail, but I just want to kind of spell it out real quick that the IO resources on the box can be used for normal ins and outs in Pro Tools, like you use any kind of Pro Tools IO, but you can also allocate things to the monitor section. So if you've got a pair of monitors, you can actually come in here and say, you know what, I want to use the DAs on the other two speakers because I'm not using them. And those become resources that are now available for you. So we're going to get into that in some more detail, but I just wanted to show you kind of some of the cool stuff there with regard to dialing this in for your particular workflow. Okay, let's talk about Pro Tools. Let's show it. Let's actually get into some of the meat of this, which is really, I think, pretty compelling. If you've not spent any time yet in it, this is Pro Tools 2020.11, new dark theme. We're pretty stoked about this new kind of look and kind of the vibe. Now, just a little bit of kind of background here. It looks like a really, really tiny session, right? My first session. It's actually got a lot going on. I'm leveraging routing folders. If you're not doing that, you really should take a look at it. It's pretty amazing. And under the hood, these are all routing folders. So if we open up drums, you're going to see all of my individual drums, kick, snare, hats, etc. Right? If we let's open up the bass. I got bass DI, I got bass amp. Open that up. Let's actually go back over here, open up the effects. I've got different effects returns, and they're all feeding into the routing folder. So it's a great structural organization, but also for routing, the actual paths are routing through that as well, which is really cool. Let's open up Vox as well. And you can see the session is getting larger and larger, and we'll open up the masters, and there's a reason for this, and we're going to open up the cues. Okay, so I've kind of got everything subdivided into routing folders or basic folders, and it's really useful. And you're actually going to see when we actually start to look at like things like talent mixes, the structure and the routing and accessing the box in some of these conversations, okay? So without further ado, let's talk about the really critical part of this, which is this DSP mixer, this Pro Tools, or rather this hybrid Pro Tools hybrid engine. What is this about? Well, I'm going to show you. Basically, we've opened up our drum routing folder, right? And you can see I've got kicks and snares and overheads, all kinds of fun stuff. We're just going to select those. And on by default in Pro Tools, if we look at operations, it says, hey, enable DSP mode if for tracks, if you go into input or if you go into record, and that's on by default. And the cool thing with this, what happens here is basically, if I pop these drum tracks into record, Pro Tools is going to intelligently say, oh, he's cutting drums. Cool. I need to put these things in as low a latency path so he can hear them when he's cutting as possible. This is what we call DSP mode. If I hover over the little lightning bolt, you can see right here, it says DSP mode enabled. So what basically Pro Tools has done is it's created a separate path through, in this case, DSPs, HDX DSPs, to a custom FPGA to the headphones or the DAs for the speakers, right? So it's literally, it's got a time-aligned DSP path in aligned in parallel with the native mixer. That's kind of what we're doing. And there's a mic open right now, just right here, just so we can kind of see some signal deflection. But now if we basically click on one of the plugins that are on my drum sound, I've got one of the Brainworks TMT channel strips, which are amazing. Right? There's a ton of different options. They have, 9K SSLs, and this is a Neve, and there's Focusrite stuff, but they're all very inspired and very, very cool and DSP, right? So I can sculpt on those individual channels. Now, the really powerful thing about this is that Pro Tools says, oh, okay, so where are these drums going? And in my case, you can see they're actually going to S drums, which is a submaster. So if I look at my routing folder, the input is S drums. Okay, cool. So it said, hey, to give you the best possible flow through the whole chain, I got to pop this into DSP too. I'm like, that's cool. So it did that automatically. And I've got a purple compressor, which is basically a parallel compressor because I'm using it in blend mode, essentially, right, on the drums. And it's got TMT as well, which is really pretty slick. But that's a little bit darker green because it says, hey, that was kind of brought into DSP mode, if you will. So what happens downstream? Well, downstream, if we look, the output of that submaster for drums is S mix. What happens downstream? Well, I open up my masters folder. In the masters folder, I've got my mix. On the mix, I've got some master processing, in this case from Brainworks, and then that flows into the master. Maybe you're doing some final, filtering or sculpting with EQ. That is also DSP. And then look, downstream, any of the cues that I'm listening when I'm cutting the drums are also in DSP. And I've got summing, I've got basically, master faders, essentially. If I wanted to limit these, I could, but those have been popped implicitly into DSP mode as well, okay? That's what we're talking about here with this. So we're gonna come back to this, but I just wanted to show you kind of the beginnings of this concept of working with this. The concept of the Pro Tools hybrid engine, I think, is really, really important. Okay, so let's pop these out just for a second. We'll go back to native mode for a second, and you're going to see it's going to basically kind of reconstruct what you were doing there. And let's actually flip back over to our keynote for a second. Now, obviously, we know what this box is for. This box is for musicians. It's for artists. It's for engineers. It's people that want to record with the best quality, the lowest latency, the best workflow possible. That's really what this is about. So I don't really need to explain that to you, but the combination of the quality of the conversion, the speed of the conversion, and that through that custom FPGA is just really inspired. And as the more we get into this, I kind of want to really show you really why. Now, I just kind of parsed a couple different DSP plugins. Now, there's nearly 300 DSP plugins that are available on the platform, AX DSP. It's the same compatibility that runs on an HDX card. I mean, some of the ones that I personally am addicted to are things like the Black Box and the Arouser from Empirical Labs. And the McDSP channel strip is pretty amazing, the 6050. So there's no shortage of cool stuff that you can cut through. And then again, once you're done, pop into native, identical sonics, and you have total compatibility to record, mix, print, send it anywhere, right? So in the Carbon package, when you buy a Carbon, we've got a bunch of really powerful stuff out of the gate that you get. There's perpetual licenses of some amazing stuff from Brainworks and McDSP and Arturia. That 6050 channel strip that is amazing. I love the Moo, is part of it, right? McDSP 6050, the TMT Brainworks console N is part of that as well as the purple compressor, which I think sounds amazing. So there's a bunch of really great stuff that runs on DSP and also native. So the question you're probably asking is, okay, this is a DSP box, right? Why are you including things like Arturia and native instruments in this Steinway piano that are just native? That doesn't make any sense. I thought we're supposed to be doing DSP always, DSP all the time, right? Everywhere. Well, no, it's really about workflow, right? It's about the right tool for the right job. Yes, when you're cutting, you want to have that crazy low latency path when you're performing, when you're recording, but when you're mixing, and actually we have the ability to bring in things like reverbs, which we're going to look at in a second, as well as virtual instruments. But you have the ability to use those tools for the right application, right? So we're going to look at that in some more depth. Pro Tools is part of the collection. You actually get a copy of Pro Tools. You get Pro Tools with Pro Tools Carbon. And with that said, there's over 115 plugins. 70 of those are actually DSP. So it's actually, you have got an incredible collection of tools that you can use to work. So how does it connect, right? How does this thing connect to your computer? Well, it's AVB. And you may not be familiar with AVB. You may be familiar with things we have from Matrix Studio. Those are Dante-based solutions. But there's a very specific reason we used AVB, and it's really about performance. It's about dedicated streams, right, and predictable streams of audio that get there in a very tight timing, right? We've been doing this for years on our high-end live sound products, SXL, and obviously in live sound, it's critical. The audio has to get there. There's no option like, hey, can I add 2 more channels to my Dante stream? Maybe, it depends on your bandwidth. This is dedicated, and it's very, very well integrated to an IEEE standard. And as a result, we can get excellent, excellent performance off of this. With that said, you need a Macintosh computer. We've qualified last version of Catalina, and we've got a whole compatibility grid we'll send to you, which is on our website. I don't want to get too into the details there, but we got a lot of resources we will send you to, and certainly if you have questions, please ask. But this compatibility starts obviously with Pro Tools 2020.11, okay? So let's talk a little bit more about sound quality and performance. And I think the guys that engineered this box did a really, really good job. We talked about, you're converting, you're capturing the whole kind of path coming in at conversion is 32 bits through AVB, 32 bits into the Pro Tools DAW environment, 32 bits. 126 dB of dynamic range. We're actually using the same clock scheme, but a kind of a turbo, a hot rodded version of that we use in SXL, which is the Jet PLL clock, running it twice the rate to really reduce jitter, and really, really awesome. The mic pre's have tremendous headroom. They're actually padless because you don't need a pad to be able to traverse that range. We're going to look at variable Z, which is really awesome, and it's really a return to a technology that DigiDesign put in some of their boxes in the past that is really inspired, especially when you're playing through a guitar, electromechanical keyboard, etc. Very, very cool. Obviously simple but useful. It's got a switching power supply built into it. You don't have to have a wall wart, which I think is a very nice thing. So let's take a look at I/O. What's the complement of I/O that's on the box? So you're taking a look at the back of this, and you can obviously see it here as well. And I've got a mic actually hooked up right now. Let's actually just let's just do a little bit of, let's talk about the I/O complement, and I'll come back to this here, right? So you have 8 mic preamps, basically 8 analog inputs, 8 mic preamps, which are controlled from the front panel. And I can actually basically just press and hold to select any of the sources. Let's say I want to control channel 5, there's channel 5. I can gain that up, I can engage phantom power, etc. And that's actually right there. But those are connected, microphones are connected to the combi jacks in the back, right? 2 instrument inputs are right here. And right now I've got my Honer connected to input 1, which is an auto sensing jack on the front, which if we go back and look at, let's go back to channel 1, it says, hey, I know there's an instrument hooked up. Cool, piece of cake, it turns orange, it knows you're connected. Great, okay? Obviously I can change that to a line level or a different input if I wanted to, just by cycling through that, okay? On the back, you've got 8 analog line inputs via either TRS or DB25. And the idea with that is that you can hook up to a patch bay, right? So that it's kind of, it's there. And then if you go into the combi jack, it takes that takes precedence. So it's just really about a flexibility type of thing. And we'll show you some more stuff in the hardware setup as we dig into it. Line outputs DB25, pretty straightforward, 8 channels. Obviously, your connection to your host computer is AVB. It is a dedicated network, high performance, again, super low latency, but it is a dedicated network connection between the host computer and the Pro Tools Carbon box, which is very important. Beyond all the analog I/O on there, you can expand. You've got 16 channels of ADAT. So you could add additional line level inputs. You could add mic pre's. You could add conversion like into AES EBU. There's a lot of different things you could do. Clocking, 4 dedicated headphone outputs, which have tremendous, really transparent, tons of gain. Very, very nice. We're going to look at the monitor section in more detail. And then dedicated TRS outputs for your near field LR. Beyond that, you start using the DB25s, which we're going to look at in a second with the monitor section. And then you also have some things like a foot switch. So I can actually trigger talkback right here, right? I'm actually turning talkback on, or talkback can be engaged here. And there's a little talkback mic right there as well. Okay, so that's the I/O complement. In terms of kind of front panel operation, any of your kind of input is happening right here, as I said, right? So if I want to get back to that input, mic 5, I can grab it there. I can, let's say, go to link and actually do a stereo record and go link from there. Piece of cake, turn my link off. Over here, I have control over the monitor section, which we're going to look at in a second. Okay, let's talk about variable Z. So variable Z is the ability to change the impedance on the instrument and the microphone inputs. And we actually have 5 different options of impedance on the instruments, and we have 3 on the mics. And so this gives you the ability to either match impedance based on the source, right? I can actually change what the instrument is seeing. And certainly depending on what's in your signal chain, if you're a guitar player, you want it to feel like you're going through a pedal first or to the amp. Basically, we're flipping in different loads of resistors when you toggle through those from 1 meg down to 32K. And these are actually similar values that we used initially in our 11 rack product. So really cool to be able to change the feel and the sonics as you're cutting, as you're recording, as you're ingesting the audio. If you're using a ribbon mic, and let's say I got some ribbons on some overheads on my drum set, I can play with the sound, certainly. Now, average ribbon mic, wants to see, at least 5 times, if not 10 times the impedance, output impedance. But I can play with it creatively as an engineer to, if I want it really rolled off, I can do that, right? So we've got anything from 1K to 50K on the mic pre's for impedance changing, okay? And again, those same values that you see, 32K, 70K, 90K, 230K, this all started with 11 rack. And part of the really compelling thing about that box as a guitar player was to be able to change the impedance depending on what's in your signal flow. And that is something that we've offered now as well with Carbon. So we're pretty excited about that. And that does absolutely affect, the way it feels and the way that you capture that signal. So let's take a look. Let's actually flip over to Pro Tools back again. And while we're here, so we'll go back over to Pro Tools. I want to look at the hardware setup, and I want to talk about a couple things. And let's actually, so right now, if we roll just for a second, you can see that we have a stereo program meter right here, and I'm controlling my speakers right here. And I've got A, B, and C. So that says I've got 3 sets of near field speakers in this case, and they're all color coded, which is cool. And I can, mute the near fields and the mains, and I can adjust all of that goodness. And then I can play with, the different headphone mixes and that kind of thing as well. So I can come into here, into the hardware setup, and let's actually look at the I/O setup for a second. Just want to show you this. Basically, what this says is, and you saw all the color coding over here. Basically, the mains, the Alt1, Alt2, and the HP1, those are mirrored. It's basically saying, hey, I'm taking the same stereo program source and sending it to my different sets of speakers, and headphone 1 is the engineer as well, okay? So that allows me just to quickly, kind of verify what's going on as I'm listening, but I can change all of these allocations. That's the cool thing. Right now it's showing, hey, all this stuff is mirrored, it's all metered going to the same place, but check it out. I can actually come into the hardware setup and I can say, you know what? I actually need some other DAs. I'm gonna turn off, let's say Alt1 and Alt2. Those are no longer controlled by the front panel, and those DAs are available for other applications. Now, as an engineer, I get to choose if everybody just simply, hey, given the main mix, walk away, very, very simple, piece of cake, right? Or I can say I want everybody to have a totally custom cue mix. And that is absolutely possible. And that's what we're doing here. So we have dim amount and we have talkback gain level, which we're going to look at in a second. But that's kind of a part of the monitor section, resources that can be allocated. Okay, so let's look at some cue mix stuff here while we're in here. Let's go back over to, oh, I don't know. Let's go to the lead vocal this time. Okay, so we're going to go to the lead vocal. We're actually going to go back, same kind of concept. We're going to track arm the lead vocal. Okay. And same idea, right? The channel that is been record enabled has been put into DSP mode, as is the 6050 that's on that lead vocal, right, as well. And then everything downstream is also in DSP mode, as we said, right? And so here's the deal. I've got, I basically built this up, and the concept was, you know, in general, if I balance the drums, I want that just to kind of be a sound that I can send to any of the 4 different performers, right? So if we come over to the drums, I've got basically a feed off of, so the drummer is HP4. I've got a feed coming out of the routing folder that is that headphone mix for the drummer, which is headphone 4, right? Piece of cake. Now, same thing for the vocalist. If we look at the vocalist, and she's probably more picky, she's HP2, and I've got basically a blend of the vocals coming off of that. But I've also got, if you take a look at this, I've got a kind of a more me, right? And certainly, obviously, I could have individual sends on every silly element in cowbell in the whole session. But in general, that's not always necessary, right? So I've just got a kind of a more me, plus the blend of the vocals. And so the idea with that is, again, obviously, I've got HP2, 3, and 4, and those are feeding down into my individual cue mixes. As you can see, there's HP2. This is the vocal mix. There's the guitar player mix and the drummer mix in this case, okay? And so I'm also injecting talkback. And one of the cool things about the talkback is that it is a standard input. It is actually input number 25. It is right here. I'm going to press the foot switch, and that is going to use the microphone, which is on the front, which is going to inject into the cues as well, right? And if I had this box in the live room, I could certainly do crazy stuff like let's actually capture that and record like a crush bus and do something with it, or maybe more practical is if you're actually recording your slate. Right. So this can be routed multiple places is kind of what I'm saying. Right. There's a lot of applications for how you could use that, but it's very, very simple. It can be engaged from the front. It can be engaged from a talk pack, from a pedal, which is auto polarity sensing. When you plug it in, turn the box on, it says, hey, I know what you are. So that's pretty cool. So that's a little bit about the cues, which have been implicitly turned into, they've been turned into DSP mode because there's a signal being fed upstream from the vocals that needs to get there, right? That makes sense? Cool. And I can just, certainly at will collapse those into my little folder here. So let's actually go and look back at our drums for a second. Let's actually we'll put the drums back into DSP mode. I'm going to record and enable the drums. And we want to look at the effects returns, right? Because we talked about what do we talk about? Like the Arturia, some of the VIs, like the Arturia plate, there's some really cool stuff. So here's the deal. If we look at the effects subfolder, routing folder, and we look at what we've got here. Okay, so we've got there's an Echoplex, which is in DSP mode, right? Tape delay, pretty cool. And then I've also got a Valhalla room. So now the Valhalla plugins, if you're familiar with them, I'm a huge fan. I think they're amazing, brilliant reverbs. This is a room. So they only exist in the native domain. There is no DSP version of any Valhalla plugin. So, okay, well, it just bypassed it. So am I just out of luck? Well, no, there's a very clever mode called DSP mode safe. And what that does is it says, hey, you know what? This can't be in that super, super, super low latency domain where it's like less than a millisecond. It's going to have a little more latency, but you know what? It's a delay or reverb. I think you're fine. It's a little bit of pre-delay that never hurt anybody. So what I can do is I can just go DSP mode safe on any returns that I want. Maybe it's a Liquid Sonics reverb. Maybe it's a Arturia reverb. Maybe it's a Valhalla reverb. Piece of cake. I can still use these now and take advantage of, using those even while I'm cutting my drums or cutting my vocals, because you're just adding a little bit more pre-delay, which absolutely, absolutely works.
Hey, Jeff, a quick interruption. Apparently, we're not seeing your mouse when you're on the screen through Zoom. So people aren't seeing what you're pointing at for some reason.
Okay. Well, do you see that right now? Do you see the mouse? No? Okay. Well, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but it disappears at times. So.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry. I'm not sure why the mouse goes away, but I will call out exactly what I'm going to click. But thank you. So we've brought up one of the plugins that comes with the bundle, which is an Arturia plate 140. Very, very cool. It's a great sounding reverb, and that is living right now. If I click on the verb track, that's actually living on the verb track, and you can see if I click on the lightning bolt, it is currently on DSP mode safe, right? And that allows me to use a native-based, time-based effect, a delay, a reverb, and absolutely perfectly capable within my workflow is options. Okay, so that is the idea with that. Cool. Okay, so let's pop back to our keynote for a second, and we looked at our talk back. We looked at our cues. I mean, we talked about cues enough, but basically, I've built 3 custom queues coming off of routing folders with additional ability to inject, more signal if necessary. Talkback has been brought into the equation, and all that is kind of, part of the conversation. Okay, cool. So let's go back to Keynote for a second. Foot switch, hook up to the back. It's auto sensing. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but pretty handy not to have to pick the right type of foot switch. Hybrid engine. So I kind of want to really double click on this. It's about using the right tool for the right job, right? It is about, hey, when I'm recording, when I'm cutting, I want the lowest possible latency. And the numbers we can pull off are really astounding. Again, below 1 millisecond through the whole A to D, D to A with DSP in the middle. But when I pop out of that DSP mode and I'm happy with the take, I now can leverage that on the host, and it's living, at the same time on the native, time aligned with that DSP mixer. It's now on the native mixer. The workflow is super simple. There's a lot of math, I assure you, going out under the hood to maintain those 2 domains, the native and the DSP domain, but we make that very simple. I alluded to the idea that this is not just for Carbon, right? This is really a really powerful capability that will be coming in the future to Pro Tools and HDX. And the ability to have, and obviously with HDX, like, why do I want to go there? Well, maybe if you need, more IO, up to 200 channels of IO and resolved sync, you will have the same type of workflow capable with massive native mixing as well as purposeful DSP allocation, okay? I just want to show you a couple more, kind of exemplify a couple things. And this is the concept of whole session playing back, tracks on the disc, VIs, audio tracks playing back. I click on a DSP button, right? And Pro Tools says, hey, I'm going to parse off the elements that I need. I'm going to route through the custom FPGA through DSP, and I'm going to hit the DA. And that's literally what's going on. You've got 2 different time-aligned domains, right? The native and the DSP. And that's what's happening with the hybrid engine. So just a little bit more detail kind of on some of the concepts with regard to the buttons and what are you seeing, right? So if it's glowing green, it is DSP mode. And then as I just showed, that has been brought over to that super low latency domain, which is all DSP the whole way till it hits the DA, right? That's what that's doing. The second one we can see there is DSP mode safe. And that is the example, exactly what we showed with essentially Valhallas and Liquid Sonics and things that are incredible tools, but they're native only, but you can still use them because they're time-based effects because you can put into DSP mode safe. And what DSP mode safe says is that when I go to record enable the lead vocal and everything goes into DSP, it says, hey, there's a send feeding into a delay. I need to make this stuff DSP as well. No, I don't. So it stays in native. It's got a little bit more pre-delay, not a problem. That's what DSP safe mode does. The next one is DSP mode auto-enabled. And that, as we showed previously, is basically, I'm going to look at the whole construct of the mixer. And obviously, if you've got a source flowing into a submaster, flowing into a main submaster, into a master, into the outputs, each one of those stages you want to be in lowest latency possible. To do that, they all get turned into DSP, and it's a darker, hey, I've been automatically brought into DSP mode is what that says. And then obviously anything else, it's a native. You finish your cutting, boom, you're back out, you're in native. And that's exactly what that is doing, okay? A couple more details about kind of plugins, right? Everybody and their brother has a lot of plugins. I have a lot of plugins, right? And part of finding what you're going to use is important. So there's a really cool thing that happens in Pro Tools now, which is this intelligent filtering. So if I'm cutting, I'm gonna record some of the Honer, and I'm ready to go, and I'm like, I want to add some harmonic stuff. Well, what do I want? Well, let's see. It pre-filters everything to say, okay, I'm going to choose black box. because that's been pre-filtered. It shows me it's got a lightning bolt screen. I can keep my domain, my low latency path, and use DSP, right? So that's pretty cool when the whole track is in DSP mode. When you're done cutting and you go out, now you see all your plugins, but you do see an indication of what you might want to pick if you're going to be recutting that track. And you can actually see, the various, in this case, you're showing harmonic is the category, but you're seeing a rouser, you're seeing black box, you're seeing all the tools that are having a DSP equivalent, right? And that's kind of what that's showing. Okay. So this is just a re-orientation, a re-discussion of exactly what we did in a little bit of a Jeff's addicted to Keynote way. Basically source track, effect sends, DSP safe mode, all of the sub chains from overheads to drum sub to submaster to master, and then all the cues happening parallel. And you can literally see how that engine is thinking. And I think that's really, really cool. So I wanted to come back a little bit, just trying to manage my time here. I wanted to come back and look a little bit, kind of talk a little bit more about AVB, because it's not a super mainstream format, right? Everybody has an idea of Thunderbolt. Everybody has an idea of Dante. Everybody has an idea of USB. And we've made a lot of different boxes, certainly over the years. And so we want to kind of clarify why are you guys doing AVB? And there's several reasons. And one of those is it's a future looking standard, right? We're looking down the road at where this goes. And certainly we've worked very, very tightly with Apple, and we continue to optimize the performance and the latency and the stability of it in this domain. And so that's really, really important. And then obviously, without really going in too much depth, Ethernet AVB is a networking format, and you can guess what that might mean. We're going to start to basically expand and scale and be able to have multiple things on that network, which I think is going to be really, really compelling. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of idea of kind of what this is all about. Yes, today it is Macintosh only, and we're working to find solutions to go Windows as well. But right now, Carbon is an option that works on a Macintosh, a qualified Macintosh computer, with that last version of macOS Catalina. Okay, just to be very specific. A couple more details I want to dig into with regard to Carbon and kind of the way it works. Now, we talked about it is an engine, right? So when you go to Pro Tools and you choose your engine, you're choosing HDX, you're choosing HD Native, you're choosing Pro Tools Carbon as an engine. But if you actually look in the audio MIDI setup, you're going to see a Carbon for Pro Tools, and you're going to see a Carbon. And the cool thing about this is it's totally multi-client. You've got a whole separate kind of parallel version in the audio MIDI setup that you can route Spotify, Logic, iTunes, anything through. You can use all that I/O to your heart's content on your Mac, on your computer. Meanwhile, all of the I/O resources are also piping via that dedicated stream into Pro Tools. So that's a very unique and a new thing. If you do need to tweak some of the clocking, like clocking to word or ADAT or whatever, you're going to do all of that now in Audio MIDI setup, because it's actually managed in that. AVB is managed in that, and the initial connection is happening through the network browser in AVB. So it's it's a lot going on with Apple, certainly with this product, but the performance is exceptional. Okay. A couple more things, and it wouldn't be my demo if it wasn't like harebrained and a little bit of really esoteric things, but just to kind of add the extra layer of, what if? Yes, this is a dedicated AVB connection to the 2016 MacBook Pro, and that has to be that way. It has to be a dedicated connection. But obviously, you can hook up multiple network adapters. If you're doing things like, hey, you got internet or shared storage or Dante, which is my example here, you simply hook up additional Ethernet adapters, USB-C, whatever, to be able to facilitate those workflows. And just to show you, I did a kind of a proof of concept. I have Matrix in my room as well, and I basically set up a Dante Via on the MacBook Pro on this Carbon machine to be able to listen over Dante to streams coming from a Matrix over Dante in my facility. So you absolutely can do this, and it's just using a separate network adapter, okay, which is important. The AVB resources are dedicated, and there's a very specific set of connectors that are required to do that, okay? So I just wanted to kind of call that out. So we're going to open it up for Q&A in a second, but before we get there, I just want to jump back to Pro Tools and just want to kind of double click on a couple other things, and then we'll transition and see if we've got any questions that we want to get back to. So kind of revisiting the concept of, what makes Carbon unique. And I'm going to go back to my kind of 3 banner things. And it is about the fidelity. It's about the sound quality, the quality of the capture, the quality of the conversion, and basically being inspired when you're recording at the input stage. And that's not just the quality of the converters. That's the flexibility of being able to vary impedance, really be able to gain stage properly, being able to hear through an excellent monitor section, whether it's headphones or whether it's near field monitors. That is all part of the equation, right? The second part, which is critical, is this concept of latency. Everybody deals with latency, right? All day, right? And the idea that I can certainly manage all of this, right? I can go and I can play with the buffers to my heart's content. Everybody's got a computer that's faster than the other one. And I can manage that. I can just keep setting the buffer lower and lower and lower. The problem comes when you're in the middle of a massive session, right? And I've got this just giant project, and vocalist comes in and says, I'm not happy with that thing we did last night. Can we recut it? And in this new world with the hybrid engine, you can. There is nothing, because the second that you pop that into DSP mode, it literally says, hey, native mixer, you're all good. Stay where you're at. I'm going to parse off this sub 1 millisecond path so she can cut and really be inspired with her performance. That is what's going on. That is really the important part of this. You are never having to deal with buffers to cut that vocal. And I think that's a really, really important part of that. And then obviously, lastly, is the simplicity of under the hood. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on under the hood. But as far as me as an operator, I'm literally just saying, hey, do I want this stuff in DSP because I'm going to cut it, or do I want it in native? And that is literally the only decision I need to make. And it's all in Pro Tools, and it's one button click away. And when I'm done with that, right, I send that session to my friend Robert, and he's good to go. He could just have a laptop. He could have a Mac Mini. He could have no hardware and a pair of headphones. It doesn't matter, right? He has the exact same sonics fidelity that I did when I was cutting with in my DSP box. And that really is an important part. So let's open it up for Q&A. And Robert, do we have any?
So Jeff, I have a couple of really good ones, and it's been hard. They've been coming fast and furious. So sorry,
okay.
Some of the guys jumped in here. But let me pick a few of them. One of them is, can I configure the front panel button to function as a mono toggle? I've done this with Omni using Alt and stereo mono fold down.
So basically, I would say coming soon. So the initial implementation of kind of at launch, this little circle button is engaging talkback, where the A, B, and C are switching between the different sets of speakers. But from the product manager himself, yes, these will be configurable for other functions coming up. But today they don't do that. But that's really good feedback, and we'll take it back to him. But the absolute intention of this is to be able to have you, and you actually saw in the hardware setup, there's the panel, which is going to allow you to assign different functions. So coming soon.
Good. Here's another one. I think you addressed this a little bit towards the end, but can Carbon and a third-party interface run PTHD in an aggregate I/O? My application is to aggregate Carbon and Yamaha Montage 7 as a single device.
So you could aggregate the part of Carbon, which is the, and just for the sake of doing this live, I just want to show you audio MIDI setup. And I made reference to this. So these are your dedicated resources that are funneled from AVB into Pro Tools. It literally says reserved for Pro Tools. And then there's the other standard Pro Tools Carbon IO, which you could aggregate. Yeah, that part of it is freely addressable by anybody, by any application. And so that should be feasible, yeah.
Another question here. I'm using Bluetooth headphones and transmitters on guitars, keyboards, etc., and looking into mics. Is there Bluetooth capability or plans to add? Routing and tripping over cables is getting old. Latency on wireless equipment is getting better and better. I haven't experienced that myself yet, but
I don't have a lot of experience with that. Bluetooth historically has been pretty slow. So if it was me and I wanted to record drums or keys or whatever, and I wanted the fastest possible, again, analog through this that I described, this chain is below 1 millisecond. I'm not familiar with Bluetooth, but certainly there's going to be extra processing in that you're adding latency. I don't know what that value is, but personally, I would stay analog.
And I
for
think you
this
kind of
workflow.
addressed a little bit of this one, but it's interesting. I think it's important to visit again. I am currently using Focusrite Claret 8 Pre-X. Can I connect the optical out of that ADAT into the Carbon and get additional I/O?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, we talk about Matrix, and we're certainly not expecting everybody to buy a Carbon and buy a Matrix Studio and, et cetera. But obviously in our ecosystem with different rooms, different facilities, different customers, we have customers that already have other products and they may have light pipe on them, for example. And so, yeah, you can absolutely uplink Carbon with Matrix Studio via optical. You can uplink this via a Focusrite box, a Personas box, what's the German company with the Ferrofish stuff, right? Absolutely. And then expand, you got 16 more channels to work with that you can certainly expand your IO count by doing that on Carbon. So yeah.
And I think here's one. Do you have a list of compatible plugins? So I would think that everything is compatible. I think what he's asking is basically DSP plugins, which I think we're getting close to, or almost 300 of them.
We do. Yeah, we have an Excel spreadsheet that exists, and I will make sure it gets sent through the. Yeah, we have that, and it has everything itemized by category and everything. So yes, that exists, and it's growing. And yeah, newer things kind of double down on that a little bit. New stuff happening, really cool stuff happening from Antares, and obviously tremendous portfolio from Plugin Alliance. There's over 75 plugins, I believe, that are DSP, and additional partners. So yeah, it's very, very cool. And again, the workflow is really unprecedented.
So just
excellent.
two more here, and then maybe we can hear from the folks that were, Omar, Eduardo, who were Tony, who were on the social channels.
Certainly.
So one is, how does it integrate with or complement the Avid S1? Integrate with.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously in terms of, the primary function of S1 or S3 or S4 or S6 is to be a tactile control surface for Pro Tools, and all of that stuff works, right? What I might presume that you're asking, which is another kind of coming soon, is with regard to the monitor section. That doesn't out of the box work yet. But just like we talk about Matrix Studio having the ability to talk to Dadman. Dadman is a Yukonized application. We are working on the same concept with regard to Carbon, such that you could use whatever. It could be S1, could be dock, could be S4, and actually communicate with that over Yukon. So that is again another coming soon. But there's a huge demand, huge request to have a Yukonized monitor section capability for Carbon.
And I answered in the thread. It was like a question about the remote pre's as well too. So
that's another one that it's interesting. We've gotten that a ton, and that's actually something that product management is actively looking at. And it'd be a great, really cool workflow, having Yukon control on those, being able to stack. Basically the next generation pre, the DigiDesign pre, right? Reinventing that, I think, is a brilliant idea.
And then the last one here from the Zoom chat is, my understanding is that there's no loop back support currently. Is this something that could be added later?
Loop back. Are you talking about loop sync? Is that what we're talking about?
I think he's talking about, I'm not sure about loop back, I'm
gonna make an assumption. He can
core
ask
audio
another question. Yeah, I'm gonna make an assumption, but I think what he's asking about is an interconnection or a communication between the different engines and core audio. That's my assumption.
Yeah, I think so.
Ask. Yeah, obviously, you could kind of band-aid that by kind of plugging light pipe, but that's not a great solution. I know that engineering has discussed those ideas, being able to basically bridge the streams, that is the dedicated and the widely available core audio stream, right? So we're thinking about that, absolutely. The other thing to mention, though, just to understand, I want to kind of double click on this a little bit, is when I was doing my Goofy Dante example and bringing audio over my network from my Matrix and bringing it into here, and I was listening through the monitor section, right? That was via the Pro Tools core audio part of the Pro Tools Carbon core audio chunk, right? So you could feasibly have Logic open using that Pro Tools Carbon IO engine and Pro Tools at the same time. And actually, I've actually done it and actually captured the same signal into both simultaneously. Pro Tools is using the dedicated Carbon engine. Logic or whatever else is actually using the core audio engine. Obviously, to get the benefit of all the cool stuff we showed you with regard to the hybrid engine, the DSP, the lightning bolt, that is certainly all about being in Pro Tools. But that's not to say you couldn't use Logic or something as a safety, or certain applications where you actually wanted to ingest the same signal to multiple places at one time. You absolutely could do that.
So that's about all that I have from the this chat window that weren't answered. So maybe I don't know, Tony or Omar or Eduardo, any questions?
Sure. This is Omar. Jeff, a couple of questions.
Yeah.
First one, does Carbon will support surround monitoring?
So Carbon is a stereo interface, today we have the ability to basically attach up to 3 sets of stereo monitors. So we certainly have a portfolio of other products that are excellent. And we talked about Matrix Studio slightly, but that is an incredibly, ridiculously capable box for 5.1 and 7.1 and beyond, up to 916 Atmos, really, with tuned capabilities. So no, Carbon does not currently support surround, but it was really laser focused on the recording musician. And that's really why out of the box, out of the gate, we did this, right? And that was that was the intention when the box was created. Now, again, that's not to say that we couldn't, grow and do some things, but right now today it is a stereo monitoring section.
Awesome. And last one from me is, can you explain the Pro Tools license that comes with Pro Tools Carbon?
Yeah, that's a good one, actually. And I should have actually mentioned that, but I didn't. So the concept with this, and this is totally unique, right? It's new for us. We didn't want to just give people that buy Carbon a 1-year subscription, right? That at the end of that year, they're like, I don't want to pay anymore. Well, man, I've got this box and all the good stuff in this box. I mean, yes, you can use it with core audio, as I said, in Logic or something else, fine. But all the cool stuff that this box does with that lightning bolt and that hybrid workflow and that the parallel, time-aligned mixer, all that cool stuff is in Pro Tools. So, well, that would really not be great if at the end of that year, I can't even use the box for what I really wanted to use it for. So what happens is, if at that end of that year, you're like, you know what, I'm good, I'm happy with the version I've got. Basically what happens is that subscription, that 1-year subscription, turns into this, it magically converts into a perpetual license, which is a pretty unique thing. They call it a perpetual parachute, but basically the idea is if you don't touch it and you don't auto resubscribe at the end of that year, it is a real solid perpetual that never goes away. Just to reiterate, all of the Brainworks and the Arturia and the UVI and the Embody and the McDSP, all of those plugins that come with the hardware in the bundle are always perpetual. So there's no risk of those going away. You own those, right? Just to want to kind of make sure you're clear about that, which is important. But if you did get off of that subscription, you would lose, for example, the like the complete plugin bundle, which is it's a subscription. You could certainly add that back in, just those plugins, but I just wanted to be very clear about this concept of it's a very unique thing, right? So and the other interesting thing about it is that it actually keeps going. So if you're like, okay, I'm going to do another year, and then you're like, you know what, I think I'm done. You could actually keep doing a couple years and stop. And at the point at which you stop, it turns into perpetual. So that's kind of how that works.
Thank you, Jeff. I don't know if Eduardo or Tony has more questions.
Hi, Jeff. There was a question that came in that might be worth talking about. How does the DSP chips on Carbon, the processing, compare to the HDX?
Yep, that's a great question. So the Carbon is the same HDX DSP that you're going to find on an HDX card. There's just about half of what you're going to find on a card. And so this was about 2 things, I will say, right? Again, kind of as we were going through it, it was the workflow. The concept is like you're never balancing everything on the DSP. You're really again, using the right tool for the right job. And that says when I'm cutting, I want all those artists to have the lowest possible latency. Great. But then when I'm done with those parts, I pop those out, right? And so it's really about using the DSP intelligently. And so you've got about half of what you have. You have eight chips. You have about half of what you have on a HDX card. And they are absolutely compatible with any of the existing, as we said, that's why we have nearly 300 plugins on the platform. So absolute compatibility with all those offerings that exist, and you have identical fidelity either way.
Jeff, there's one that just came in here, fresh off of the Q&A. I have Pro Tools Ultimate. Will Carbon support it?
That's a great question. So, so yes, and it actually ties into the last question about the license. So what you could do, let's just say you've got Pro Tools Ultimate, and maybe you're just running native right now with just software only. If you purchase Carbon, in lieu of having a separate parallel subscription, you can choose to basically extend your Ultimate subscription, right? That is an option. You can actually get a 1 year, turn that into basically a 1 year extension of your Pro Tools Ultimate subscription. So that's actually pretty cool. And then again, you can kind of take that way, or you could go parallel. You could have this be the 1 year sub, which turns into perpetual if you stop, and then maintain your Ultimate. But absolutely, Carbon will work with Ultimate, and obviously things like advanced automation and more video capabilities, etc. All that goodness would be unleashed with Pro Tools Ultimate. But just to be specific, Pro Tools Carbon does not require Pro Tools Ultimate. That's a really important part. Okay.
We're getting several questions, which I've answered, but I know it's probably everyone's mind. What about Big Sur?
Yeah, what I can say from engineering is we have a better relationship with Apple than we've ever had, and I've been at Avid for over 20 years, and we are actively working on it, working on through the issues that we need to work through. But we're in a good place. Obviously, I can't say anything right now, right yet, but we're in a good place, and we will have compatibility information as soon as we get it. No, with that said, there's probably other questions about the new silicon from Apple. That's going to take longer, certainly, but we're in a really good place, I think, with Big Sur, and just stay tuned for that one.
Well, there's another question here about, and I think we've addressed it a little bit about the Claret, but other products that have ADAT support to use to expand the I/O. Maybe you could name a few other of our.
Yeah. Take a look at Ferrofish. That's a pretty neat company, and they have a box that can do either AD to optical, and also can add Dante, and pretty cool. And that could not only expand optical, but actually bridge Dante as well, which is pretty interesting. Certainly there's no shortage of other, RME has boxes that will hook up LightPipe. Focusrite has boxes that will hook up LightPipe. There's no shortage of boxes that you can hook up and clock everything and expand the line or preamp complement in your box.
Questions about compatibility with sessions, earlier versions of Pro Tools. I mean, just like it's always been with any of our products, right?
Yeah. There shouldn't be any real concerns with regard to. I mean, Pro Tools 2011 again is compatible. We support through macOS 10.15.7 Catalina. We have done extensive testing with lots of different engines, as I said, from Carbon to HDX, HD native. Software only, core audio built in, all that. There should be no real concerns with regard to moving sessions around. And the neat thing, again, all of the goodness that we're using with this is our known entities, right? The native processing of AAX that you are used to is the same. The DSP processing is the same. It's the same IP. It's the same SDK that is under the hood in HDX. So they know what they're doing. And we have pretty high level of confidence that you're not going to have any issues moving sessions around.
And a clarification here is, I think, again, probably someone that's looking to do maybe post Carbon supporting video sync, right? Even if you have Pro Tools Ultimate, no. You know,
yeah, that's correct. So differentiation. So okay, so why might I want to go HDX? I need 128 channels of I/O. I need larger quantities of I/O. I need frame edge alignment and resolve synchronization via Sync HD. HDX. That is the solution. Obviously, for post production, it's essential, and that would be required to yeah. So that's not supported with Carbon. Correct.
So I think we're about run out of questions here, Jeff. We're at the top of the hour. Anything last closing stuff that you want to kind of?
I want to thank everybody for spending some time with us. I will say one thing: get your hands on a Carbon and record with it, because I can tell you all day that it's cool. It's very, very cool. But until you actually cut some stuff through it, you're going to have an aha moment. It's just like, oh my, because it feels good. The latency is so low. It's really compelling and inspired. And I would encourage you to go talk to your reseller and get one and at least test it, demo it out. I think it's amazing. So thank you for spending time with us. We appreciate your time, and be safe.